So look, I've only got 10 minutes and really just want to cover a little bit around some of the work that NERA does, but really about the supply chain opportunities. It probably, I listened in, watched, really enjoyed the conference, and yesterday's afternoon discussion about jobs and regions. This probably relates a little bit to that one. So NERA, we're one of 6 industry growth centres of the federal government, and our vision is Australia is a global energy powerhouse, a sought after destination for investment, and the leading source of knowledge and solutions. And it's probably the latter part of that vision that I'll be talking most about today. We do focus on ensuring that Australia's energy resources sector is smart and technology led, and we know that it's a very disruptive environment at the moment, the energy sector, but Australia's got a lot of strengths right across the board, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We do a lot of things. We're a small non-profit organisation funded principally by the federal government. We also put about $15 million of Commonwealth money into collaborative projects, about 55 collaborative projects worth about, well, our investment's about 15 million, but we more than double that in terms of the size of those projects. I really want to talk a little bit initially about our energy sector. So we have, you know, when I talk to people, and in Australia, we often talk very much across purposes across energy. But Australia really has opportunities and advantages right across the board. For people that might play poker, we're sort of sitting with a hand of aces when it comes to energy. You know, even though at the moment we're in a pandemic situation and that energy demand globally is down and significantly more in some sectors than others, the AEA still sees energy demand increasing significantly, and Australia is a net exporter of energy resources. I was just checking to see whether these have been updated yet. They should be updated next month. But annually, the Australian government puts out statistics on Australia's energy resources production. You know, we're the largest exporter of LNG. Oil and gas is 25% of our energy resources production. 59% is coal. We're the second largest exporter of coal. 14% is uranium oxide. We've got the largest known uranium deposits in the world. And renewables virtually untapped. And talk a little bit about that, because that's really what brings ammonia and hydrogen into NERA's interest. You can kind of see there that it's only sort of 2% of all the types of renewables produced in Australia. And we know that greenhouse gas emissions, sorry for the spelling error there on greenhouse, but most of the renewable discussion in Australia and the investments have been into the electricity sector, but there's 66% of our greenhouse gas emissions which are outside of electricity. And that gives a great opportunity, particularly in industrial processes and in transportation for ammonia and hydrogen, perhaps in areas that are more difficult to decarbonize. And I'm going to use hydrogen and ammonia interchangeably. You know, there was a whole, you know, in terms of the work that we do, we see them interchangeably. We think ammonia has got huge advantages as part of pursuing the hydrogen strategy nationally. We know each state and territory has got a hydrogen strategy. Ammonia sits within that, and you know, just refer here to the National Hydrogen Strategy and the whole section on the ammonia advantage. So I just want to make sure that people are aware of that. As part of the National Hydrogen Strategy, we're developing a hydrogen industry cluster, and I think the really important part is that what we want to see is a hydrogen and ammonia knowledge economy out of Australia, as well as a production, use and export economy. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing in that space, and I guess the importance of some of that to Australia. And clusters is something that Australia hasn't done a lot of in terms of knowledge clusters, but really big in Europe. So we've got there some data on European clusters. There's something like 3,000 clusters across Europe where they're coming together, where businesses are coming together, collaborating, also competing, but driving knowledge transfer, development of technologies, development of skills, and really potentially collective marketing into global markets as well. And you can kind of see the economic statistics there are quite amazing. You know, 13.5% higher average wages, 143% more global frontier firms, and 141% more rapidly growing startups. We think it's a really important initiative within the ammonia and hydrogen energy conversation. So a cluster can extend supply chain capabilities up the value chain, and also if we extend into areas of lower local advantage. We don't want Australian businesses just getting work on Australian projects, and then those projects go and effectively it's construction related and perhaps a little bit of minor low value but local work. And I'll talk a little bit about our oil and gas supply chain report, which I think is a really good corollary with ammonia and hydrogen. So as part of our formation of a hydrogen industry technology cluster, we were lucky to hold a series of physical workshops with more than 240 professionals in February and March this year, just before lockdowns started. We had 11 workshops in 11 cities, over 240 professionals involved, really looking at how we bring together and I guess really hunt as a pack, really collaborate so that we don't end up with a sort of distributed collection of subscale businesses and technology that actually doesn't make its way to market at a global scale. We're also, so next steps for us is we're supporting regional technology clusters of technology businesses. You'll probably hear more about that next week to form part of a national hydrogen cluster network. And the regional opportunities are quite significant here, right? So on the left-hand side of the slide, I've got the work that Arup did on the Australian Hydrogen Hub study right across the country. And then you can look at, this is slightly old now, but this is CSIRO data on the projects, and you can see again the projects are distributed. So we think there's a really great opportunity to build the regional skills, the regional businesses and the regional economies on the back of a hydrogen and ammonia energy industry. And this is from Professor Doug McFarlane's and et al.'s work on a road to ammonia economy. You can kind of see there's a whole range of cross-sector supply chains. So we think there's also businesses in other parts of chemical manufacturing, in the energy sector already, in other parts of manufacturing and transport logistics that can look to diversify their businesses into the new ammonia energy industry, and we welcome that kind of pivoting for really clever Australian businesses. Really just wanted to talk a little bit about, back in March we put out Growing Australia's Oil and Gas Supply Chain Report. The supply chain's really quite good in Australia, but we spent about $400 billion across infrastructure in the LNG sector in Australia over the last probably 12 years. And we do have some pretty good suppliers in Australia, but a lot of it was captured in the construction projects and we didn't leave behind a global world-class supply chain. And so we're doing some things in the clustering space. We've seeded a subsea innovation cluster. We've seeded an ocean energy group cluster. We've got a national decommissioning research initiative. We do a whole range of things to do it. But with hydrogen and ammonia, we've got an opportunity to get in really early and build that capability so that we can be exporting the knowledge and services and technologies, not just not just ammonia energy and hydrogen energy. Just a real example, the MET sector, so the mining equipment technology and services sector out of Australia is world class. It supports the mining industry. And in fact, 38 of the top 100 METS companies in the world are based out of Australia. The next best is the US and Canada with 9 each. We haven't got that in the oil and gas sector, but I think it would be fantastic to be aiming to do that in the ammonia energy and hydrogen energy sectors, particularly as a lot of those supply chains, a lot of those supply chain partners haven't yet been fixed in a global scale. So we've got opportunities to get Australian value into those global value chains at this point. So that's probably all I wanted to say at this stage, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Very good grasp of the time. I see that there's a coordinated approach and initiative in Australia to build up and establish a hydrogen economy, which will in turn lead to the production of green ammonia that's much needed for shipping's decarbonization.
On mute.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, Mayan. I will start with a slide of our joint work. I have, as Mayan said, I have come from MEN. I have 21 years experience working with two-stroke diesel engines. And the first slide here shows some of the joint project that we have done together with ABS and MEN. So I'm well and familiar with the work ABS is doing. I recently started here in ABS. The world's first gas ship using LNG was jointly developed between MEN and ABS and was from towed and was delivered for gas operation in 2015. And the second big project we did together was a conversion of a Qatar gas ship. It was equipped with a 7S 70-bore engine, Q-Max size LNG carrier, and it came in operation on LNG in 2015. Another project, this was actually Navigator gas, and they were the third one who ordered the MEGI engine back in 2013. This ship came in operation in 2016 and was 2 years later converted into ethane gas operation. At that time, when this ship was developed, there was no firm codes, so it was on the same level as we see in ammonia today, basically. Starting out with the reason why we are focusing on ammonia for marine fuel for the future. If we look at the IMO emission requirement, then the goal for 2030 is to reduce the CO2 emissions by 40%, and by 2050 to increase that to 70% per ship. 40% correspond to a fleet-wise reduction of approximately 30%, and 70% reduction in 2050 correspond to a fleet-wide reduction of 50%. For IMO, the strategy is to continuously follow up, doing studies on the market to see what is the actual development in greenhouse gas emission. We see now that a lot of LNG ships is coming into the market, and they release, some of them release methane into the atmosphere. And this is a heavy greenhouse gas. It's 28 to 84 times more isolating than CO2. So this is being monitored. On the long-term goal, it is the target for IMO to come to a point where figures and calculation for greenhouse gases can be done from well to wake. And there's a couple of examples there in the bottom showing LNG from well until it has been delivered on ship and used for fueling. The same with fuel oil here on the right side. The fourth IMO greenhouse gas study has been released, the draft here in August, and the conclusion for total shipping is that, as can be seen here, that the global percentages of greenhouse gases emitted from international shipping is 2%, and this is on the same level as it was in 2012. If you look at the CO2 emission compared to actual emission from 2012, then it has increased by 5% on the international shipping. If you look at the total shipping, it has increased by 10%. It was the same finding that was, or similar finding that was done on the third IMO greenhouse gas study made in 2012. The expectation due to the EEDI index introduced in 2030 from IMO was that in 2018 the reduction should have been approximately 11%. So there's a big deviation in how much actual CO2 which has been released today compared to what the expectation was from IMO. And the explanation is that the growth within shipping is much bigger than expected from when the EEDI index was agreed. In order to live up to the EEDI index and perhaps also other measures in order to meet greenhouse gases, which is coming, like the EEXI, which is for existing ships, where you can introduce technologies to improve the efficiency. Then there is a wide range of fuels that can be used today already, and if you look at and alternative fuels, then LNG, methanol, ethane gas, LPG, the ships with those is already in operation. Ammonia and hydrogen is being considered for many ships. And the new fuels, there's of course the biofuels, gas to liquid, and different kind of synthetic fuels. And then the E-types of fuel, which is covering basically many of the alternative fuels there, which is produced from renewable. So for a ship owner, a small ship owner, perhaps also the bigger ship owner, it is a quite big challenge, and actually to find out how are they going to design their future ship, and how are they going to make a strategy for reducing greenhouse gases for the future. ABS have taken the initiative and established sustainability centers on 4 locations in the world. There's one in Houston, in Copenhagen, Athens, and in Singapore. Marianne is located in Singapore, and I'm in Copenhagen there. And the idea with this is to guide ship owners in this new market for alternative fuels and new technologies that can be implemented on new ship. And here's one example of what we can do and what we could offer for ship owners. In recently 2018, there was agreed between several banks that they will introduce a lending or financing of ship depending on their greenhouse gas emission, and this was called the Poseidon Agreement. And they also agreed on a projection or transaction, and what they could do, or what they would do, would be to offer loans for fleets which is only able to fulfill the greenhouse gas emission, and make it depending on these loans. And here's an example of a study that ABS have done. This is for 10 bulk carriers. In the starting point 2020, they are above the Poseidon trajectory level. So the idea from our side is to make a plan so they come below and follow this transaction throughout to 2030. In 2020, the new fuel is introduced, and this is the low sulfur fuel, and that has an impact on the efficiency of the ship. So therefore, the CO2 emission for the fleet goes up. One idea would be, in order to reduce that, simply to lower the speed of the ship, and that has a good impact of CO2 emission here, and then they are in line with the trajectory from Poseidon. Next step for a new order would be to order a ship based on LNG as fuel. And that is also improving the greenhouse gas emission. And the last step, in order to lower the CO2 emission even further, would be to introduce ammonia as fuel. As it is today, as I will look at the CO2 emission, then it's what is emitted through the exhaust gas system. They are not looking into well to wake. So this could actually be gray ammonia or brown ammonia that was used in those ships, and they will still have the same impact on emissions. In the future, well to wake figures need to be considered, and then it has to, of course, to be green ammonia. The rules and regulation for ammonia ship is not yet fully in place. The IGC code specify the use of natural gas, but it has also a paragraph about the alternative fuel, and it is proving alternative fuels as fuel not toxic under some consideration. In order to get approval for using ammonia as fuel in gas carriers, which IGC code is covering, then there's a requirement to discuss this with a flag state. The IGF code was developed and adopted in 2015, and this describes how to use gas as fuel and other low flash point fuels. The requirement in order to get approval is to follow this roadmap, which is developed by IGF and the classes. The most important part of this is to perform a hazard, a risk assessment based on the concept design of those ships. And then from the findings in this hazard, the detailed design should be made, and all the hazard that has been, or all recommendations from the hazard should be addressed in this new design. Then update in a failure mode and effect analysis, and perform the hazard afterwards. And when this is completed, the design can be updated and documentation can be sent for approval at the class. And when,
one more minute.
Yeah, 1 minute, okay, I'll conclude. And after that, class and the flag agrees on a section of this particular ship. And then there is an actual approval for operating this ship on ammonia. One example here that ABS is looking at together with the ship owners here is with a main two-stroke engine. And then here the component included in the hazard covering tank, fuel gas supply system, fuel valve train, lockout pumps, and ammonia supply system. The scope is listed here for a typical scope for a hazard, and it is the full arrangement with all the ammonia containment system, bunkering arrangement, and then the hazard is to go in and look into all the modes of operation. In conclusion, we can say that the class and regulatory framework is in place. And there has been done also the first risk assessment on approval of ammonia fueled ship, and also from ABS side. The hope is that we soon in the future will announce this together with the parties participating. Concerning IMO, then today ammonia is considered as a CO2 neutral or CO2 free fuel, but this is only because that the well to wake strategy is not implemented in the IMO regulation. When this has been done, then green ammonia will be a necessity to meet the requirement, depending on the EEDI index and the EEXI level, which is which is needed, then a blended strategy can be used by ship owner, where they blend gray and green ammonia. Thank you. That was all for me.
Thank you, Rene, for the interesting presentation. Looks like we have a number of developments and consideration on introducing ammonia into the shipping industry. We will next enter the Q&A panel discussion. Looking at the time, we have about 30 minutes. Does anyone has any questions that you want to raise at this moment? If not, I will move on to the group chat to take some questions first. I think Doug has posted a question on asking Paul to share more details about the seed clusters. Doug, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just looking at, thank you, and thank you to Paul. I was just looking at Paul's answer here in the chat. I think maybe that, if everyone's seeing that, I think that's probably already answering the question. Paul, thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I jumped the gun, but yeah. We'll be able to talk more. I mean, it's really a rolling conversation, I think, with many different stakeholders about how we build those knowledge supply chains. We've got lots of ingredients for great ammonia energy and hydrogen energy, technology, education, research in Australia. It's kind of how we bring it all together and exploit it globally.
And clearly NERA's got a huge role to play in that, which is great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks. I think Brad also have a question for Eng Kiong. Have Singapore government or MPA made any public statements related to using ammonia as a bunker fuel? Brad, you want to add more to this question?
No, that's really it. Thanks. I just want to congratulate Eng Kiong on making a start in looking at the issue, but just interested to know whether there's been any government statements one way or the other around ammonia as bunker fuel. But it's great to see that start happening.
Maybe I can add on to the reply. If you look at, I think there's a YouTube John was sharing by KBR and
Is Eng Kiong there?
It looks like he's frozen. And Paul too. Oh no, Paul's not frozen.
No, I'm just not moving.
Maybe just move on to the and come back to him when he comes back. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jacinta. Maybe we can move on to the next question by Leah about slow shipping, whether it has a disproportionate impact on shipping times and profitability. Maybe Rene, you want to take this? Or maybe Leah, you want to add on or explain your...
Sorry, shall I ask the question? It's
can you repeat the question?
Certainly, certainly. So, I mean, there's a menu of options that are available for reducing emissions from shipping while they're still being powered by fossil fuels without any carbon capture and storage or minimal. And then, of course, there's the transition to zero emissions fuels. And going back to the issue of unique geographies of different regions, and I'm a great fan of Robert Kaplan, how do you think that the Australian consideration of things like slow shipping as an option to reduce our emissions in the near term, are the costs of slow shipping, for instance, higher for a country like Australia that is long way away from its destination markets in many cases, compared with exporters who are intra-European exporters or those that are more proximate to their export markets? So how does geography perhaps hasten Australia's consideration of zero emission shipping fuels versus some other destinations and origin markets?
Yeah, the thing about the slow speed or slow speed shipping is that you will need basically more ship in order to transport the same amount of goods. By reducing ship speed, of course, you reduce also emission. The way that the charter market is put together is that when you are competing to get a project, then there's normally a time requirement to how fast you should go on the voyage, and this you have to live up to. So it's basically an agreement which is made between ship owner and charter on how fast you can operate, It is basically an economic evaluation which has been done. You saving fuel by reducing ship speed, 30% fuel by approximately by reducing the ship speed by 1 knot. But on the other hand, you might need some more ship in order to transport the same amount of goods. So that's and I don't see that Australia is any worth position compared to other parts of the world when looking at the transportation of goods. Yeah, that's I think what I can say to this.
Okay.
So, sorry, just to clarify, if you are transporting 1,000 kilometers away or 10,000 kilometers away, is there not a different economic cost?
That's clear, but I think most of the goods from Australia is more mining and LNG. Going to China. There's a lot of bulk carriers going between Australia and China. The owners who win this contract is depending on the charter agreement from the mining industry, and they can agree on a lower speed, but the impact is that they will need more ship on this routing. So I don't see Australia is worse located compared to other parts of the world. That will be similar. There is of course critical goods, groceries, and where there's a time restriction on the speed, and for those it may not be possible to reduce speed, but that's only a marginal part of the groceries that is being transported.
Okay, thanks, Rene. We have Eng Kiong back with us. Maybe Eng Kiong, you can continue what you want to mention about the Singapore.
I'm not sure which portion I dropped off, but I just want to mention that the KBR report, if they mention H2, you should reference that the import of H2 and derivatives is also important for Singapore national strategy. That's why I mentioned not just as a bunker fuel, but for Singapore power consumption, electrical generation. So it is H2 is a strategic molecules for Singapore decarbonization effort. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Eng Kiong. We have the next question by Georgie. Georgie, do you want to read out your question?
Hello.
Hi, Georgie.
Yeah. Hi, Rene. I just wanted to ask if this is correct, that IMO current rules ban the use of toxic materials as fuel for ships, and ammonia is obviously toxic. Is this a problem, and how to solve this?
I would say that this is correct, but you can get around it by fulfilling this process I just illustrated during my presentation, and then get the flag approval for the use of ammonia. And when one flag have approved the use of ammonia for that specific ship, then it's been rolled out to the other flag states, and then they have a time of a couple of months to complain if they have anything against it. But in my time, I've been working both with the new fuels like methanol, LPG, and ethane gas, and in all cases the same methodology has been used, and there has never been any feedback from other flag states that they don't want to allow ammonia or this new fuel as a marine fuel. And when the flag state has approved the ship operating on ammonia, then it can enter to all harbors around the world. So of course it's a consideration, and it has to be taken serious. It has to be shown during the HACCP investigation, and further also the HACCP, that you can reach the same level of safety as you have for a ship operating on gas fuel.
Thanks,
but there is a long in addition, there's a long tradition for using ammonia in ships. Ammonia has been used as a refrigerant in ships for many years, since I think since the 60s. The first reefer containers, they used ammonia in the refrigerant to cool their cargo, and also today in fishing boats ammonia is being used so the codes is more or less in place for using ammonia in ships.
Thanks, Rene. Maybe I move on to Paul. I have a question for you. What do you think are the economic benefits for the region, and what can the leaders actually take proactive steps to try to maximize the potential opportunity?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. Look, I think regions can really put out the welcome mat and coordinate. There's a lot of activity, there's a lot of initiative, a lot of interest in regions, but having places where people can demonstrate and trial, potentially the local stakeholders looking to become early procurers or users of ammonia energy and hydrogen energy really is important, and having those places and just having that coordination is important to sort of really make a region quite welcoming. You know, I think there's opportunities then for that region to attract projects that may be producing, exporting, in particular locations, and using, being early users of ammonia energy. And what that does is also brings investment to that region as well. So whether it's entrepreneurs looking to scale their business out of that region, or other things. I've seen other regions around the world in different technologies, including in hydrogen, developing up a prospectus, for example, mapping out who the players are, where the facilities are, and showing a commitment to actually growing the industry and potentially procuring technology and using ammonia energy and hydrogen and being an early player. So I think all of those types of things, but it really requires some leadership and some coordination and really a vision for a region. And that won't necessarily happen if the natural strengths of the region bring an ammonia energy hub, for example. Doesn't necessarily, will it bring all the technology and the skills with that? That may be imported. The locals get involved in some construction related activity, and then most of the work's automated after that. So they miss out on those longer term, more sustainable jobs.
Okay, so job creations and investment expansions for the regions, that would be the
yeah. I mean, look, for regional economic development, it's all about job creation. As a former economic development manager of a city, jobs and high value jobs and sustainable jobs and full-time jobs are really what drives the economy.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Eng Kiong, maybe I ask you one question. I know from your presentation that you listed a number of future alternative fuel: ammonia, methanol, biofuel, and hydrogen. You put ammonia at the top, if I'm not wrong. Is ammonia the front runner among this alternative fuel? If yes, why?
We had a publication sometime April this year on the alternative fuel for international shipping. You can go to our website, it's there. I think our assessment is very in line with all the other class and other major publications. We do see ammonia being a front runner, if you want to use that term, after 2030. One of the reasons is because the engine to power ammonia is not even going to be developed until 2024 by men. And it takes some time for that to come, for the fuels to come into the value chain and the ship to be built, the supply chain to ramp up the supply. And of course, one of the key reasons is because when you start to compare ammonia with other low carbon fuels like methanol and LH2, it is not very different in terms of volumetric density, energy density. And of course, one of the several points that has already been stated by previous presenter is that it can exist as an atmospheric liquid state at -23, which is very similar to LPG. And most importantly, it has very mature global supply chain. So all these put it in a very favorable position when you consider the next viable option like liquid H2. So I would see the closer competitor will be methanol, which is also seems to have most of these characteristics except for the C in the molecules. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Eng Kiong.
Maybe I can comment a little on this. Yeah.
Sure.
I think ammonia has a big advantage that you're not using CO2 in production of ammonia, and in the future, and not so far future, I think there's going to be a lack of CO2. We're going to use CO2 for production of plastic, rubber for our tires, and the whole petro industry is going to use that. Today, the petrochemical industry is taking up, I think, 40% of the fossil fuels already. And if this is going to be replaced by renewables, there will be a need for CO2. And CO2 is not so easy to get from the atmosphere. It's difficult to filtrate. There's only 0.04% of CO2. And so there's a lot of filtration that needs to be done in order to take CO2 out. So it's very energy intensive. So CO2 would be expensive in the future, I believe, simply because there's a need for it. And therefore, it's natural to use nitrogen and produce ammonia from hydrogen. That would be more efficient.
That's an interesting perspective, Rene. We are trying to cut CO2, but CO2 in future may be a commodity that we want to have to be able to produce some of the other products that we want. Thank you for the different perspective. Next, we move back to the chat group. Richard Nayak, you have a questions? Would you like to read out?
Yes. Yeah. So this could be to sort of Rene or Dr. Kiong either. With respect to then sort of switching, if you're reducing sort of the speed of shipping, as we'd sort of mentioned before, given the lifetime of these ships, are those going to be stranded assets, do you think, then going forward?
No, I don't see any danger in reducing speed of shipping. This has been done with great success over the last since 2008. So I have no fear on this. I think the shipyard will like ship speed to go down because they need to build more ships. I don't see any negatives on this.
I can chip in a bit. I think for a period of time, 5 to 10 years ago, I think ships was actually kind of designed to operate at a higher speed. So when you say reduce speed, I don't think there is an issue. It's more on the situation whereby it is too low a speed where it becomes negative and you have more emissions as a result of low loads. But in terms of stranded asset, I don't see that. Actually, I see the challenge is more related to you need more ships to make up for the logistic to transport in the case of Australia, to supply to your client. Because in slow speed, the turnaround will be slower, similar to container vessels. To complete a round, you may need more vessels. So to compensate, of course, you can say you want bigger ships. So I do see this is the two options. But then the challenge will come back if you have bigger ships, you have bigger engines, you want to operate at a slow speed, and so. Yeah.
Agreed. But so if you're requiring additional capacity on the ships, be them larger or that you have more of them, then you'll have constructed those. And given that you've got a trickle-down effect in shipping, that means that they sit around for 40-year potential lifetime. Given the timeline that you're thinking with 2030 being ammonia-based, aren't those stranded?
It's not, because in fact the container industry, I mean the container vessels has already adjusted to a lower speed. Lower speed is kind of the norm right now for them. So I think it depends, of course, on what Rene has said, that it depends on the client.
I think also, if I can comment a little, if the engines which is equipped in those big ships, they can operate at low load down to 10% without any complication. So they can really reduce speed compared to their design speed. So it's not that these older ships is not able to be used in the future. Actually, we have seen examples on ship which is operating all the way down to 6% engine load with success. So I don't see any bigger issue there, actually.
Thanks, Rene Eng Kiong. Muraki-san, you have a question. Do you want to read out the question?
Yeah. My question is that, ammonia is already being used in the transportation of marine, like cargo, and Rene mentioned like the refrigeration. But this is the first type of fuel, and there is a requirement of the code for fuel ammonia. So my question is, what could be the time frame to establish the code of the fuel ammonia to start the use of ammonia? Because it's possible to use an ammonia in few years' time. One of the triggers we are looking at is that we are planning to implement larger size ammonia carriers for the fuel ammonia, because the market is large, like 50 to 80,000 cubic meters of vessels. That is possibly the new installations, and that can adapt the ammonia diesel engine to reduce the total carbon dioxide emissions in the chain from the production to the burner tip. So we want to know that how quickly that ammonia fuel can be used in the maritime market.
I have a clear answer to this, and this is that if you come to ABS, we can help you to get the approval for this ship operating on ammonia, and this we can do today, and we can have it ready when the engine makers is ready with their engine solution. It's not a huge challenge to get approval for the use of ammonia. As I tried to explain, I've been involved in this first with methanol back in 2013, later on with ethane gas in 2014, and recently with LPG in 2018. And on all these ships where we've got approval from flag states for using of these alternative fuel. So it's not complicated to go through this process. It's fairly simple. Shipyard, engine makers, makers of different components, they are familiar with this process and know exactly what to do. So it is a straightforward process, which more or less is an industry standard. But IMO get approval at IMO, it can take long. As far as I know, then there's no flag state which has proposed ammonia as a marine fuel yet. But I hope it soon will come. This proposal, because what we have seen is that from new fuel has been proposed until IMO accepted, it takes approximately 10 years to get this approval from IMO. So it's some time. Yeah, maybe Marianne can comment.
No, so Rene, if I hear you correctly, we don't have to wait for the code approval. We can actually have an alternative route to get the approval for an ammonia fueled vessel, right?
Yes. Yes, exactly like it has been done with the methanol, LPG, and ethane gas in the past, and also LNG when we started out with this.
Good. Thank
you very much.
Next, I'd like to ask Paul another question. I actually recall in the presentation there's a pie chart which shows the energy sources for Australia, I think, and the percentage for renewables is very low at 2%. Just wondering, what's the reason for that? Is it because there's a lot of coal and LNG that you can tap into, and hence, renewable took a backseat, and now, with more focus on decarbonization, this is coming back up again? Just like to hear your opinion.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I mean, I think there's a couple of reasons. I mean, I think one of them is just that we export more than 2/3 of our energy resources currently, so we're a 350% energy economy. Most of that's LNG and coal exports and uranium oxide. And I think the other part is that renewables, we've had very much a domestic focus. And I think we're moving into the third wave of particularly solar generation from a kilowatt scale, where we've led the world. We've got 2.5 million rooftop installations in Australia. We've gone through, we're still growing that sector. We're still growing the megawatt sector, but it's actually the gigawatt plus sector. And I know Andrew Dixon was on the line yesterday. I don't know if he is today, but some of those really big multiple gigawatt projects are kind of starting to come on stream now, which actually start to look at Australia much more in the global sense in terms of low or zero emission energy, and also in terms of powering our industrial sector. So a lot of it's been very early on. And also, I mean, our renewables are particularly solar generation needs to be time and place shifted for maximum use. And that's where you've got high voltage DC cables, you've got batteries, you've got hydro, you've got ammonia and hydrogen and other carriers of energy that are sort of coming into the mix. So I think there's a number of things, but I really don't think we've scratched the surface yet of renewables in Australia. Just to use one example, I was at a workshop in Gladstone in February this year, and a Japanese representative was talking about if green hydrogen or green ammonia was produced and to meet their market need in 2050 from Australia, we'd need 1,400 gigawatts of solar capacity. At the moment, we're adding 2 to 3 gigawatts a year in a real boom. 1,400 gigawatts is a different scale altogether. So I think the renewables opportunity is virtually untapped in Australia, notwithstanding the fact that there's also carbon utilization and other ways of decarbonising our traditional fuel sources as well.
So there's a lot of potential to scale up.
Absolutely, there is. Yeah.
Yeah. Back to the group chat. I think we have Brett. Questions for Eng Kiong. Brett, do you want to? Yes.
Thanks, Marianne. Eng Kiong, if we think about the technology that CSIRO is developing with Fortescue, which can crack PEM fuel cell quality hydrogen out of ammonia, and I think from that we can get something like about 150 to 160 kilograms of high quality hydrogen out of a ton of ammonia. If we then assume a pump price of say $6 to $7 per kilogram of hydrogen, we find that the value of the hydrogen in a ton of ammonia could be as much as $1,000 a ton. Now, this is much, much higher than what we would have to get ammonia down to be competitive in the bunker fuel market. So my question is, given that Singapore is looking at hydrogen and its application, is that a way to start the flow of green ammonia between Australia and Singapore? We get it up to you guys, you crack it back to hydrogen, you use it in your heavy vehicles on the ports, buses and whatnot, and we start to get the ammonia flowing between our two countries. Then we come down the price curve to the massive bunker fuel. I'd just be interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can give my comment, but it's just my comment, not Singapore's position, just to be clear. I think it is definitely easier to start with a land-based application compared to the marine, knowing that the marine has a lot of other restrictions, which I just now mentioned in terms of bunkering. And it is also a lot easier when the quantity is smaller and you are talking about hydrogen. We know that there are commercially available storage means. So in that sense, if you mention heavy duty vehicles, I think you are predominantly addressing the sector where battery is insufficient as an energy storage means for this type of heavy applications. So there are interest to trial fuel cell trucks for commercial or terminal operations. So I don't see that as impossible. It is definitely possible. The only question actually I ask is when you say first break into import of ammonia from Australia to Singapore, it's more from the angle that the trial can actually start with brown ammonia. And slowly when the supply chain catch up, you can start with a small quantity to do a trial. In fact, Singapore itself already got a storage terminal for ammonia. And so it's just a matter of Australia supplying that to the storage terminal here, brand it as green as per the source. Then you do the mixing or the usage as per application. So there are ongoing efforts at the working groups of course industry players to say that can we do a trial on the actual vehicles? We know that these are commercially available. So yes, I agree with you. This will be a nearer term goal, in my opinion. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Eng Kiong. Personally, I have a question to the three speakers. What do you think is the biggest hurdle for introducing ammonia as a marine fuel? Just like to hear your thoughts. Rene, you want to go first?
Yes, I think the biggest hurdle is actually to get the price level down on ammonia. I think the approval process is standardized, it can easily be followed, so there's no issues around this, but the hurdle is to have ammonia available for the marine fuel, which is competitive in price. And the price I heard yesterday was that the price of ammonia was $340 per ton. And I just looked up the bunker prices here this morning, and for very low sulfur fuel oil, it's around $300. But the calorific value is a lot higher. There's a 2.1 factor between the calorific value of ammonia. And so in reality, the price on ammonia should be down on $150 in order to be competitive. And this is a gray or brown ammonia we're looking at. So this is the challenge, to bring the cost down on ammonia. But as soon as the cost is there, there's no doubt there's many who would like to implement this into their operation, simply because it has the benefit for the future that you can go green when you need it, and you can also blend in green ammonia and reach the level you need.
Thanks, Rene. What's next? Eng Kiong?
I would like to maybe cite one instances where I spoke to a technical director of a shipping company. We did a study and eventually we shortlisted to methanol and ammonia for their usage. I think what struck me very clearly that from that past conversation was the decision was deliberate not to choose ammonia because of the perceived safety from the refrigerated experience. So I think if you want to talk other than price, for actual application where crew and human is actually in close proximity with a marine fuel in the engine room. I think safety is a perception. If you think the safety is not an issue, that you need to overcome for the market acceptance, even for the entire supply chain, especially starting from bunkering onwards. Because by default, we don't interact with the fuel in such a close proximity. So I see safety as one of the bigger invisible barrier. Yeah.
Thank you, Eng Kiong, for your perspective. Paul, you want to chime in something, or you agree with Paul?
No. Look, I'd probably say both, right? You know, I think it's great. It's the cost, the price, the value, and the safety. And I think the thing we all need to keep in mind with any of these different technologies is that we're all talking about a tool to decarbonize, there is a competition. There's a fierce competition between various pathways to decarbonize across a whole range of different energy applications. And there's no given that ammonia energy or hydrogen energy is going to win out in any one of those applications. So it's really going to come down to the safest, most accepted, most commercial decarbonisation method, I think, to do that. And I think it's worth keeping that in mind. Lots of people in the storage space, lots of people in other ways looking at how do you propel maritime vehicles and the different ways of doing that. We all need to be careful, not have the blinkers on, and be careful of what's happening either side of our industry.
Thank you very much, all three of you. I see that there's like three main hurdles that we have to get through: safety, cost, as well as the value, which is how to bring it to a decarbonized economy. So we have come to the end of the session.